All right, guys, we're back staring at my engine bay, and in this video, we're going to talk about if it's worth it to upgrade your turbo. And I know some of you guys are kind of on the fence about it, and obviously I have a big turbo on my car now. I got the car with the stock turbo, did a lot of testing and tuning with that, so I think I'm a good one to give you guys some feedback on my thoughts, whether I think it's worth it, and kind of what you can gain or benefit from upgrading your turbo. Now, probably one of the more common questions I get is if it's even worth it. Is it going to be a noticeable improvement in performance, and are you going to feel it in the car? And I do get it. You know, if you're going to be spending four figures on a part, you want to make sure you get four figures worth of improvement in performance. And I can 100% say that a bigger turbo will support more power on your B58. I basically recommend any of the major players. So if you're looking at hybrids, you can get a Pure, Flowmax, Turbo Systems. If you're looking at a full frame kit like mine, you can get the DOCRace or a big boost kit. All of them support a lot more power and will, bring a lot of enjoyment to your car if you're trying to go faster. I know something that I've heard some people say is if you're only running pump gas, then it doesn't make sense to upgrade your turbo because it's going to be just as fast as a stock turbo on ethanol. And that's not really the case for a couple reasons. First of all, if you're limited to pump gas, then on stock turbo, you're not going to be making the power and seeing the performance figures that you would with ethanol. So going from pump gas on stock turbo, you're going to be making a lot less power, and upgrading your turbo with the same pump gas setup will allow you to make more power and run the car a lot faster. Same thing with ethanol. If you're running ethanol on a stock turbo, upgrading your turbo and running the same ethanol mix will allow you to make more power. Now, I've illustrated that a lot on my channel. For those of you that are new, feel free to go back and look. I posted up dyno, I've posted draggy times, I've posted basically everything I can to show how the performance of my car improved after I upgraded my turbo. So going from an ethanol custom tune on my stock turbo to the aftermarket turbo on pump gas, I took off about a half second on my draggy times. And then going with ethanol, exactly same setup again, still TU pump and same clutch, tires, everything else equal, just an upgraded turbo. I was able to take off about 1.5 seconds from my previous ethanol stock turbo time. So the car was much faster, much more fun to drive, much better driving experience in my opinion, and I 100% recommend it. Now keep in mind your gains on pump gas are going to be dependent on the turbo that you pick. A bigger turbo can make more power than smaller turbos on pump gas. So most turbos like hybrids out there will make anywhere from 500 to 550. I've seen some get as high as 600. But I know like people are looking at my car and saying, well, you have this huge full frame turbo kit. So of course it's faster on pump gas than your stock turbo was on ethanol. But this is an EFR 8374. This is the smallest B2 frame EFR that BorgWarner makes, and it's only rated for 750 horsepower. So I know it looks really dramatic in the engine bay, but it's not like the car makes 1,000 horsepower full tilt. And if a name like Pure 800 means anything to you, then you understand that having a 750 horsepower turbo on my car doesn't give me that much of an advantage. Now, another thing that I've seen people say is it doesn't make sense to go with a big turbo because you're going to have to upgrade your transmission, get port injection, and all these other things. And that is true if you want to get the most out of the turbo. But even without all of those things, you can still get a lot of gains just from upgrading your turbo system. No matter what, you're going to be limited by something. You don't have to push the car as hard as it possibly can to find the limits of the turbo itself. If you're limited by your fuel system or your engine or your transmission or any other component on the car, you can safely tune around those limits and still see an increase in performance. So again, on my car, I tuned it on the TU pump just to see how many gains were there before I upgraded to the Deutsch Stage 2. The car was still faster, still fun to drive, and there was just more room to grow into it as I continued adding parts onto the car. So again, whatever your setup is, there's always room to improve, but you can still take advantage of a higher flowing turbo. Now, the last question that I want to address, and probably the most popular one, is people are concerned about the lag. Is the lag really bad? Does the car feel lazy around town and things like that? Now, I can 100% say, with all things being equal, a bigger turbo will spool slower than a smaller turbo. That's just the physics of it. No matter what you do, the wheel is going to be bigger, and that means it's going to have more weight, and that weight is going to be farther from the center of the wheel, so it requires more inertia to turn the turbo and get that airflow that you're looking for. However, the good news is that everything isn't equal. The stock turbo is not necessarily a poor design, but there's a lot of room to improve on it. So I mentioned in some of my older videos, one of the things I like about the EFR turbo is it uses a lot of modern technology to optimize the spool, even at the higher horsepower level it's rated at. So a lot of aftermarket turbo manufacturers use lighter materials, optimized number of blades, and even unique blade designs. And these design upgrades help decrease the amount of spool while still increasing how much air it can flow. So that way you have a higher power turbo that doesn't have a significant impact on lag. Now, the easiest way to illustrate what you're going to be dealing with is maybe assume that your car is going to be making around 500 wheel horsepower. Even if the turbo is rated for 800, you can tune it down, low boost, and run the same kind of 500 horsepower limit that a stock turbo would hit max effort. Now, if that's the case, you can expect your stock turbo to hit peak torque around 2,500 RPM. On an aftermarket hybrid or a full frame turbo, you can see that peak torque around 3,000 or maybe 3,500 RPM. So you'll see about a 500 to 1,000 RPM difference in how quickly you'll hit your peak torque. So that means that if you're basically flooring it from a stoplight, the stock turbo will hit the peak torque sooner and basically get out on you. But after you get to that peak torque and it carries speed up into the higher rev range, that's where the big turbo will shine, and that's where you'll pass the stock turbo car. But that's not the only thing that you're dealing with, because everything isn't just about flooring it from zero. If you're actually racing your car, then there are a lot of things that you can do to optimize the performance of your big turbo. For example, if you're running a drag race, a lot of people have told me, well, the stock turbo will have a shorter 60 foot because it spools faster. And that's completely ignoring the fact that you need to know how to launch the car in order to make it go faster. So if you're brake boosting the car off the line, using launch control, anti-lag, whatever the case may be, that will help you get the RPMs up so that you're closer to where your peak torque is made, and building some boost so that when you leave, you have more torque. So that's what's really going to allow the car to be much faster in performance for drag racing, roll racing, basically everything is just making sure that you're optimizing where you're leaving the car, brake boost, so that you can get extra torque off of the line and then carry that speed through the higher RPMs. Also, things like shift points are key, making sure that if you have a dyno, study that so that you know exactly where your peak power is and where the meat of your power band is. On a stock turbo, a lot of times it makes sense to shift around 6,000 to 6,500 RPM. But if you have a bigger turbo, you're going to want to shift at redline. All of your power is going to be up top, and you're going to still have air that's flowing and increasing how much power the car makes up towards redline. So you want to shift at 7,000 RPM. Even just driving around town, adjusting how you drive can help make the car more fun. If you shift around 3,000 RPM, you're always going to be higher up in the rev range. So if you ever want to make a quick move, floor it and get out of your way really fast, all you need to do is stay up higher in the RPMs and your peak torque is right around the corner. Yes, if you're flooring it just from a roll, your stock turbo will spool a lot faster. But if you're higher up in the rev range and basically optimizing how you drive for your turbo, there's really going to be a minimal sacrifice. Now, once you're above that RPM threshold, say you're at like 4,500 or 5,000 RPM, flooring it will get the car to spool extremely quickly, whether you're on a stock turbo or a big turbo. So it's really nice if you are roll racing and you have the traction to do so, dropping to a lower gear and getting those RPMs up will help decrease the lag. Even the turbo that I have on the car spools up in less than a second when it's above 4,000 RPM. So that's something that's really nice to have. If you do have the traction to do so, then dropping a gear will get you out of the hole really quickly. Now, also consider that you don't want to go with a turbo that's too big. And when I say too big, I'm looking mostly at turbos that are rated for like 1,000 plus horsepower. On our cars, those turbos tend to be extremely laggy. You won't hit peak torque until like 4,500 to 5,000 RPM. And you really run out of airflow on the stock cylinder head in a lot of cases. So it's just hard to take advantage of it. I know a couple people running those bigger turbos are actually shifting higher. So they shift around like maybe 72 or 7,400 RPM just to get a little bit more meat on their power band. But for most people, it really doesn't make sense. So if you really want a turbo that you can maximize and use all of it on your setup, Usually it makes more sense to stay below the 1,000 horsepower rated turbos. Like 8 to 900 is a really good spot to be in. Even if you have a built engine and transmission, it's just really hard to take advantage of turbos that make 1,000 plus. So I think that covers like the main questions or concerns that people have asked me. I definitely don't regret going with a big turbo. I went with the kit specifically that I did, so that all I need to do is swap to a bigger turbo when I'm ready to make more power. But plenty of people are happy with their hybrids as well. It's really just up to you to consider how much you want to invest and what your future plans are. Even if you don't want to shoot for the moon right now, you might have, future goals to break records and things like that. Hopefully this helps you out if you're on the fence about upgrading the big turbo. Long story short, do it. Don't think about it. You won't regret it, and you'll motivate all of your friends to do the same thing. So thanks for watching. I hope this video helps. And if you have any other questions or comments, leave them down below.